Our next talk is titled Us or Them. Mrs. E.Hill DeLoney is a psychologist and activist, active in the civil rights movement for more than 6 decades. She has been a key partner in shaping our public health research focus in Flint and is helping us to recruit outstanding scientists to our Flint campus. Dr. Jennifer Johnson is one of those very accomplished scientists who have chosen to do their work in Flint with Mrs. DeLoney and others. Please welcome Mrs. E.Hill DeLoney and Dr. Jennifer Johnson to the MSU Rx stage.
Thank you. Social psychology research has found that when we divide the world into us and them, we automatically care less about the well-being of whoever we've defined as them.
The findings of the social psychologists are correct. When the well-being of the us and the them is being considered, the them will not be the top priority.
Unfortunately, it's easy to divide the world into us and them because we tend to live and work around people who look like us and who earn like us. This is a map of Grand Rapids from the 2010 census, with each dot representing a person and the colors of the dots representing different races and ethnicities. And you can see how they get grouped together. In fact, 64% of the people living here in Grand Rapids would have to move for this area to be fully integrated. That number, 64%, is called the segregation index. In the Detroit metro area, the segregation index is 75%, meaning that 75% of the people in that area would have to move for the area to be fully integrated. This is a map of income across southern Michigan. Lighter is lower income, bluer and darker is higher income. And again, you can see how the colors tend to be grouped together. If you look, you can see Grand Rapids, Lansing, Detroit, Flint. And all this is to show that we all move around in little subsets of the world that look like us and that earn like us.
I am one of them. Not by choice, but by the Constitution of the United States of America, in which the them that I am a member of was written in as 3/5 of a human being, less than human, property, a tax. That article has been amended, but the spirit of that article is alive and well on October the 2nd, 2015. Dr. Kenneth Clark wanted to know the impact of the us and them as it related to the rights of the them. So he decided to do research to see what the impact of it would be on children, because he knew the impact on adults, which was internalized self-hatred and inferiority, and on the us, internalized superiority and white supremacy. So he took dolls in his research. He had black dolls and white dolls. I'd like for you to see the dolls that he had. One doll being black, whose name is DeLoney. The other doll being white, the name being Johnson. His theory that if he had certain interventions, that he would take the young people and talking to them in 2-year-old languages and showing them things for appropriate for 2-year-olds, taking them around into various environments on the us communities and in the them's community, and doing all that he could to make them know how precious they were. But when he finally asked them, which doll would you want to be? They said Johnson, the white, blue-eyed, blonde doll. His conclusion was that African American children, the them, hated being black by the time they were 2. My conclusion is it had nothing to do with color and everything to do with privilege. The people you just spoke of in Detroit and Grand Rapids have a choice. They have chosen to live among people they know, look like, and whose historical and cultural experience in America is the same. But as a little girl under separate and equal law, I had no choice. I had to stay in that line of demarcation, and had I crossed it, I may not have been able to return to the safety of the line that had been approved for me. When I was about 8 years old, my Aunt Geneva took me to pay bills in a dry goods store. With us, the clerk was Mrs. Johnson, Dr. Bailey, Mrs. Trick, all nice names. And then when my Aunt Geneva got up there, she said, Geneva, what? And I said, her name is not Geneva. Her name is Mrs. But before I could get this, oh, Mrs., my Aunt Geneva had snatched me up. She was holding me so tight, her hand over my mouth, I couldn't breathe. I'm trying to struggle to get away. She's looking back, talking to the people, and I'm trying to figure out what's happening. She's dragging me out of the store at the same time. When we got outside the store, she was shaking. I didn't know what was wrong, so she was trying to get me away. When we got home, there was discussion among the family members but they didn't talk to me because I'm a little girl. So I still didn't know what was going on. Fast forward about 6 years later, I understood perfectly what she was doing that day. She had saved my life. A little boy whose name was E.Hill, 14 years old, had come from Chicago to visit his family. Some gesture or action offended the us. He experienced one of the most cruelest deaths a person could ever experience. His mother, through all her pain, wanted everybody to know what they had done to her son. So she authorized an open casket funeral in Chicago and allowed the press to be there. And to this day, I can see that picture on the Jet magazine. So when they have a choice like they did in the Grand Rapids and Detroit, we have come a long way. But we're still operating under the social justice system as opposed to a human justice system.
There were more than 11 million admissions into U.S. jails last year. In fact, the 3 largest mental health treatment systems in the country are jails. When I first walked into a women's prison, I saw rooms full of women who were a lot like me. Most of them were in their 20s and 30s, and most of them were moms. I thought, these are women, but for one small twist of life circumstance could easily have been me, or my daughters, or actually could still be. One of the prison clinicians I worked with told me that many of the women in prison have been told their whole lives that they're nothing. As I worked there, I realized that what she told me was true. 80% of the women in prison have been victims of physical violence. 80% have been victims of sexual violence. For some, prison is the first time anyone has even tried to tell them that they're worth something. Almost all of the women will be leaving prison, and most within just a few months. They worry about their futures. Where will I live when I get out? How will I find a job now that I have a felony on my record? How will I stay safe? How will I keep my family safe? One woman's first priority when she got out was to find her son's ashes. She didn't know where they were. He was 15 and had committed suicide while she was in prison. I realized pretty quickly that it didn't matter much for me to figure out the details of what the mental health clinicians should do and say, if the prison systems could afford only enough qualified clinicians to address emergencies, and if the publicly funded treatment systems in the communities to which women were returning were also grossly under-resourced. When my research assistants would call the contacts of our participants who'd been released from prison, they would often reach worried mothers who would pour out their hearts on the phone and ask, "Do you know where my daughter is? Do you know if she's safe? As her family, we have tried everything. Is there anything you can do to help her?" The mothers worried and the women themselves were scared. They were right to be scared. I have an ongoing study enrolling women releasing from jail. It's enrolled 100 women and 2 are already dead. One died of an overdose. Another was killed by her boyfriend. They found her body in the trunk of a car. Every woman leaving prison who's murdered or left to die alone in a crack house is somebody's daughter, and often she's somebody's mother.
The women in prison are being seen from a social justice system. If it were a human justice system, they would have more people to help them. They would not be told that they're nothing and are unsafe. We have to keep looking at the fact that our social justice system does not allow all people, us or them, to be seen as fully human, worthy human beings.
When I moved to Michigan last winter, I went to visit the social workers at one of the nearby jails. This municipality, like many others, can only afford 1 full-time and a couple part-time social workers for a jail that admits more than 12,000 people per year. When I walked into the jail, I noticed a lot of people just sitting in the lobby. When I asked, I was told that by law, the jail has to release people at midnight. They can't stay there. However, many people getting released from jail don't have coats and don't have anywhere to go, and they were afraid that they would freeze to death in the 20 below weather. So they just stayed in the lobby for as long as they could. When I went upstairs, I asked the social workers about their needs. They said what they needed most was for people to come, volunteers, to come and talk, but mostly just listen to people detained there. In particular, they mentioned that they had several people detained who had developmental disabilities, who didn't fully understand what was going on, but knew that it was bad and that they would likely be going away for a long time. The social workers asked if there was somebody who could maybe come and just sit and color in coloring books with them, to provide some company and some reassurance that they were not completely alone.
Those women had been told that they were nothing and unsafe, and they were afraid for the conditions that they experienced once they were there. But imagine a whole group of people, the thems, who all feel that way. In 1990, I was invited to participate in a research project that was going to look at racism and racial disparities and health disparities. I did not want to participate on that. The leader of that and the convener was Mrs. Ada Brown, who asked me several times to be a member of that team. I kept saying, no, thank you, until finally I said to her, why do you want me to be on that committee? I told you I have no interest because I didn't think I could do anything about racial and health disparities. She finally looked me in the eyes and said, Mrs. DeLoney, I want you on that committee because if you believe in something and really believe in it, the whole world can be against you, and you will stand your ground. Well, I hadn't seen myself in that light before, but I realized that I heard her describing my mother. So I thought, maybe I should try this. Well, when I went to that committee meeting, the first committee meeting, everybody had been curious about this woman who was coming and would not come. So one of the people had the audacity, one of us, said to me, "Why did it take you so long to become a member?" I hesitated and said, "Are you sure you want me to answer that question?" And he said, "Yes." I still hesitated because I'm thinking, I don't know if I should do this. But I also thought about what she said to me. My response was, I did not want to come to this committee because I hate all white folk. It got definitely silent in that room because there's only about 3 thems and the rest of them are us. And I didn't say anything for a second. Then finally I said, "Not because of anything you have done to me personally, but what you have done to my people, the thems from the beginning until now. That's why I don't want to be here. There's nothing I can do about it." But I've said I was going to be there. So they started talking about commitment. And I thought, okay, this is a commitment because we knew, and I knew, there's going to be things said that may hurt people's feelings. So I said to them, if I'm going to be here, and I've committed to be here, I've given my word, that's all I have, I'm expecting you to be here. So let's go around that table and let everybody pretty much let us know if you're going to be committed to that. And they did. They really did. And I must say that we were together for a long time. But another important aspect of it, because we're talking about racism, we're looking at each other. And I said, as I'm looking at you, what do you see when you see me? What are you thinking when you're looking at me? How do I make you feel? Again, that was like, nobody has been asked those questions before. The convener besides Mrs. Ada Brown was Dr. Toby Citrum, who was established in the University of Michigan Ann Arbor School of Public Health. He went home and reflected on my questions. He was preparing for the Jewish holy days, high holy days. And he did not want to go in his high holy days thinking about that he had never been asked that. He did not know what to do with that. He knew we both had race prejudice, as I did, but I had no power to enforce them. He had race prejudice, but he didn't choose to use his power. And what he did, he wrote a manifesto, a one-page manifesto that was so powerful that when I read it, I knew I too had to change because the stress from my race prejudice would have killed me just as much as racism. Racism hurts both races, the European Americans, the African, the us and the them. The us by the internalized racism, internalized superiority, and white privilege, I stated before, and for the them, internalized self-hatred and superiority. But from that committee, we stayed together. One professor, Dr. Suzanne Seelig, took 7 years for her to understand, and through my eyes, understand about racism. But Bobby Systrom, who was a health officer for 17 years before he understood. But the fact was, there was a commitment. And if we make the commitment to move from the social justice system to a human justice system, the women incarcerated like that would be treated as human beings because they would be seen as fully worthy human beings.
One day, a month or two ago, I decided to take a walk outside my office building to stretch and think. Later that night, my husband told me that at 1:30 that day, 30 minutes before I decided to take a walk, a man had been shot and killed outside the bus station next door to my office building. someone had died, maybe 200 feet away from where I was sitting, and I was completely oblivious, upstairs checking my email. I felt terrible for being so unaware of the suffering going on right outside my door.
The man could kill another person like that because they didn't see him as a human being. He saw him less than a human being. So he felt like he could do that. In our freedom school that we have, we teach the children that each is precious. In fact, we have a mantra that says, I know me, I accept me, I love me, I forgive me. A higher power lives within me. Again, I want you to see these two dolls, a black doll and a white doll. This doll now is named Alan Elijah. This white doll now is named Joseph. Alan and Elijah are the many colors of blackness. Joseph, on the other hand, is blonde, blue-eyed, and white. In our research in our school, we teach that both dolls are good. Both dolls are precious. Both dolls are unique. And that is why we are fighting so hard to have a transformation from the social justice system to the human justice system. Because the social justice system, as I stated before, does not allow all people to be treated as fully worthy human beings.
In conclusion, there are no throwaway people. There is no us in them.
When that transformation takes place and we move from the social justice system to the human justice system, there will no longer be
Us and them.
it will only be
Us.
it is us.
It is us.
Thank you.